Hey guys, welcome to the video. Salt here. Today we're going to be doing something a little bit different. We're going to be doing a 4,000 subscriber special. I just wanted to take some time to say thank you so much, and it is so greatly appreciated for everyone that continues to watch and tune in. No matter how sad this sounds, it has really changed my life over the past year of doing this, so thank you so much. So last video I had asked people to write questions for me, and I would answer them in this video. And it could be any question, any personal or Warframe or anything like that. My cats are fighting in the background. If you hear them, I'm sorry. And so that's what we're going to be doing today. I probably should have given people maybe a little bit more time to ask questions instead of just one video's worth of time. But we still have a good amount of questions, and I want to give a little shout out to one of our commenters, Guess My Name, who actually asked a lot of good questions. And so like 50% of this content will actually be his question. So I'm really thankful for you, Guess My Name. I'm going to guess your name is probably either Andy or Andrew. I'm going to think that you are our new Grenier intern, Andy. But we'll see. Maybe his name will be something different. So let's start with his first question here. We have, what kind of jobs have you worked in the past? And we'll start from my earliest job that I worked, which my family owns a motel and a diner in New York. For people that are not in the United States, a lot of people think New York is New York City, but there's actually a lot more to it. New York City is just a little speck of what New York actually is. Most of New York is mountains and woods. And that's where I live. I live in the mountain and woods part of New York. We're actually like a 4 or 5 hour drive from New York City. So the motel that we own, or not that I own, but my family owns, is kind of in a very rural area, right off the highway. So most of the people that we have stopping there are just truck drivers that are like on their routes, maybe going from Canada to the US or from the US to Canada. So my job there from about like 12 or 13 years old was to separate the trash in the motel. So I would separate it into 3 piles. We would burn our trash. So there was a pile for burnables. There was a pile for cans and bottles to return for some money. And then there was a pile for non-burnables and non-returnables that we would just take to the dump. So that's what my job was for about 5 years. When I was a kid, I was a little bit salty about it because my father was an immigrant from Malta, and he was very stuck in his ways of, if it's a family job, you work for the family and you don't make any money. And I was a little bit salty about that because I would see my friends who didn't do anything, and they would get an allowance of like $20 a month. And, here I am sorting through disgusting motel truck driver trash, getting paid nothing. But as an adult looking back, I understand why he did what he did. He didn't have a lot of money either. And it really was just working for the family. Like, what was I going to do if we had $20? Buy some like little action figures or something. So I did that for about 5 years. And then when I was 17, I joined the U.S. Marine Corps. I joined as an infantry assaultman. So you join as infantry, and there's the motto, every Marine is a rifleman. But if you actually join the infantry as a rifleman, you get a lot more training as a rifleman than other Marines. So the motto that every Marine is a rifleman is kind of true, but actual riflemen get a lot more training on the rifle and on CQB and all other kinds of stuff. So you start as a infantry rifleman, and then when you get to the School of Infantry, you're able to choose, if you want, you could stay as a rifleman too, but if you want, you can be a specialized infantry, which is machine gunner, mortarman, assaultman, tow gunner, and I think the West Coast has LAV crewman as well. And I wanted to be an assaultman because they were like, if you want to blow things up, you want to be an assaultman. And I was like, damn, that sounds fun. And so that's what I chose. Assaultmen do rockets. Now, the rocket at the time that we used was the SMA. That changes throughout the years. I think when I got out, they were transitioning over to like using the Carl Gustav again. But when I was in, we were using the SMA. The assaultmen are also the ones that get trained in the Javelin missile system. Again, I think that eventually got phased out. Actually, I think the entire assaultman role was phased out eventually. But even when I was in, they were starting to somewhat phase the Javelins out. And assaultmen are also demolition breachers. So we would like put demolition charges on doors and on hinges and like, or on walls too, and do like entry into buildings. So that was my role as an assaultman. I was also trained in a secondary role as a combat lifesaver, which is a really corny name. I don't know who the hell came up with that name, but that's what the Marines call it. Combat lifesaver is like a mini medic or a mini corpsman. So for anyone that doesn't know, the Marines don't technically have medics. Their medics are called corpsmen. So if I say corpsman, it's basically just the Marines word for medic. So the combat lifesaver is kind of like a mini corpsman. And it's just because when you're in combat, like sometimes it's your corpsman that will die, or sometimes it's your corpsman that will be injured and he needs someone to help him. And that's where your combat lifesaver comes from. You know, your combat lifesaver has some basic medical training to do basic things like tourniquets, IVs, things like that. Actual medics and actual corpsmen have a crap load more training, like way more training than combat lifesavers do. But combat lifesavers just have enough training to help the corpsman if he's the one that gets hit. Also, you know, unfortunately, sometimes you do deploy under power or understaffed. My first deployment was we deployed under power, and so most of our patrols didn't have a corpsman even on it, and so your combat lifesavers would be like used in those situations as well. But of course, that's a secondary role. So I was a assaultman as my primary. So if I had two things I had to do, one was putting a rocket into a building and one was putting an IV on a dude, my primary role would always be first, which would be the assaultman role with a rocket. My first deployment was part of a MUSOC, Marine Expeditionary Unit Special Operations Capable. Towards the beginning of the war in Iraq, about 120 of us were tasked to sweep, clear, and control the city of Hit. It was like a decent-sized city in Iraq. We did that for a few months, and then we got sent to Djibouti, Africa, to attempt interception of like a convoy that was coming through. So there's a drug that is very, very popular in Africa called khat. It's like a chewing tobacco, but it's not tobacco. It's like an opium, or it's a narcotic of some sort. So it's like chewing heroin instead of chewing tobacco, and it funds a lot of the bad things that happen in Africa and in the Middle East. And so we were going to intercept a shipment that was coming from Somalia to Ethiopia through Djibouti. So we were in Djibouti. But at the end of the day, we just sunbathed for 2 or 3 weeks because we never found that convoy. So they either went around us or they just never came because maybe they heard we were there. So Djibouti was basically just sunbathing and hanging out with the Djiboutian military. We played some soccer with them and stuff. So that was kind of cool. We did some foot patrols and vehicle patrols with them. But again, nothing nothing came of it. It was basically just, little hikes that nothing came of. Second deployment was in Abu Hayat. Abu Hayat was like a collection of small villages that were all like a mile or 2 miles apart from each other. Again, our job was to sweep, clear, and control the area. We also had to build our base in Abu Hayat. So we went out there without an actual firm base. And so we went out there with construction vehicles to actually like berm up this abandoned building that we made into a firm base. The second deployment was a lot chiller than the first deployment. The first deployment, there was probably like 1 or 2 firefights a day. You weren't always involved in them, right? Maybe it was another squad that was out that was involved with them. Second deployment was a lot chiller than that. It was maybe like 1 or 2 firefights like a week or every other week. Although the very beginning of the second deployment, like when we had just gotten there, probably within the first 2 hours of even being there, there was a dude that loaded an entire dump truck full of artillery shells and drove it right into the friggin' building that we were like berming up. Luckily, I don't know how the hell, because it was a gigantic dump truck full of multiple artillery shells. I don't know how no one got friggin' killed other than the dude that self-deleted into the building in the dump truck. I don't know how anyone didn't get killed, but yeah, it was kind of crazy. But I mean, that was like a crazy event that happened on the second deployment. But other than that, like it was pretty chill. It was maybe like a firefight every other week, and most of your firefights in Iraq, especially towards the end, like on the second deployment, were just kind of like drive-bys, like a dude would drive by, like throw like 1 or 2 mags of crap at you. You'd throw some crap back at him and he'd drive off. Like that was your basic firefight on my second deployment, which was kind of boring. But, thankful. You don't always want to be in firefights. The rest of the time I was in the Marine Corps. I was part of Op 4 for training. The Marines, at least at that time, I think this changes sometimes throughout the years. But when I was in, you would do 4-year enlistments at a time. And at the end of 4 years, they'd be like, hey, do you want to re-enlist for another 4? Or do you want to get out? And, they'd offer you some money. They'd be like, if you re-enlist, we'll give you 50 grand. And in the infantry, it's not very common for people to re-enlist. Like out of my entire company of 100 plus dudes, I think there was 2 of us that re-enlisted. And it wasn't me. I got out after 4 years. So it's pretty common in the infantry, just because the infantry is a harder job. You get treated kind of shittier than other jobs. It's also hard to rank up in the infantry compared to other jobs. Like your basic infantrymen, after 4 years, will still be an E3. Whereas another job, they might be an E5 after 4 years. So not only is it a hard job, you get treated poorly, it's hard to rank up. There's just a big reasons why people do end up getting out and don't re-enlist in the infantry. But at the end of those 4 years, they do know that okay, we got the maximum amount of deployments out of this dude. He's only got 6 months left, so he's not going to be going on the next deployment. So let's just use him as Op 4. So that's what I was. I got put on Op 4 for training for the next 6 months, which is you just get put on training exercises with the dudes, except instead of actually doing the training, you're the bad guys. You play the bad guy and you ambush patrol their patrols while they train and stuff. So they'll give you a box or 2 of MREs and tell you to go sit in the woods and ambush patrols that come by. Using blanks, of course, not live ammunition. Oh God. So yeah, that was that. The next job I had was as a nurse. So when I got out, I of course went to college and I became a nurse. Sorry, I'm pulling my cat off my desk here. So I became a nurse. I spent about 5 or 6 years working in a nursing home, in an end of life. So a lot of nursing homes have multiple facilities within them. They have rehab facilities and an end of life section. So I kind of worked sometimes I would be in the rehab. Sometimes I'd work in the long-term care. Sometimes I'd work more at the end of life people. And I really liked that. It was very fulfilling. It was a fulfilling job. It was nice. The next 5 or 6 years, I continued to work as a nurse, but as a jail nurse, which I also really liked. Now, the jail nursing wasn't as fulfilling. It's not as warm and fuzzy and nice of a job working in a jail as it is in a long-term care facility. But it's nice in that as a male, as a dude, you work with other dudes. And so there's a little bit more camaraderie, or you can kind of relate to them a little bit better. So as a male nurse who had been in the military before, there was a bit more comfort working in the jail. So total, I worked as a nurse for about 12 years. I still technically am a nurse. I eventually started working for myself after. So then that's what I'll get to next here. So I started working for myself as a carpenter and a woodworker, doing some cabinets, small furniture, outdoor decorative pieces like arbors, planter boxes, things like that. Yeah, and I really like doing that. And I'm lucky enough, I don't know if lucky is a great word for it, but when I was in the military on my first deployment, the vehicle I was in had drove over double-stacked anti-tank mines, and it was destroyed, and I had received some injuries. And so when I got out, I get a monthly stipend, money, whatever you want to call it, for injuries while I was in. And I'm lucky enough because of that, I'm able to work for myself and maybe make a little bit less money than I did as a nurse, but still be able to be fine, right? Because I get a little bit of money from the military for that, and I get some money from doing carpenter and woodworker stuff. So that's what I do currently. Yeah, that's the work history there. The next question from Guess My Name is, what genre do you like the most in shows and games? And for me, this is an easy answer. It's going to be sci-fi and fantasy. I love sci-fi and fantasy. I loved the Lord of the Rings series. I loved the Harry Potter series. I was a big nerd into the tabletop Warhammer. My first army was orcs. My second army, when they released, were Necrons. And I eventually, I currently, so we still play tabletop Warhammer, me and my wife. I currently play the Drukhari, which are the old Dark Eldar, is what they used to be called. I think they got like copyrighted, so they had to change the name to Drukhari. But I used to play, or I do currently play Dark Eldar. And my wife actually plays the Harlequins, which are kind of like the neutral elves. You have the Eldar, which are the good elves. I'll say that to oversimplify it because there's not really a good faction in Warhammer. But you have the Eldar, which are the good elves. You have the Dark Eldar, which are the bad elves. And you have the Harlequin, which are the neutral elves, kind of, because they draw their soldiers from both factions. So she plays Harlequins. I play Drukhari. We love Warhammer. I read a bunch of the books. Yeah, me and her are big nerds when it comes to like sci-fi and fantasy. We've probably watched most of the series on like Netflix, Hulu, anything that's whimsical or sci-fi or fantasy, we've probably watched it. All right. Guess my name's next question is, what's your favorite food? And, I have to say, I do identify as a fat dude. So my favorite food is everything. But if I had to pick something specific, it would be bread. I love myself some sandwiches. And that's going to go on to his next question, which is pizza or toasted sandwich? And obviously the answer is going to be sandwich there because, bread, pizza's got one, sandwich got two pieces of bread. Got to go with sandwich there. You get more efficiency, more bread efficiency on those sandwiches. I'm not saying pizza's bad. I do like pizza too. I definitely like Hawaiian pizza. That's going to be a little bit of a hot take. I know some people are going to think that's heretical, but I do love Hawaiian pizza with pineapple on my pizza. But out of those two, I'm going to pick sandwiches though. All right. I guess my name's next question is going to be any funny hijinks that you were ever in. I thought hard about this one. I've been in a few hijinks, but I was trying to think of like some like funny stories maybe. I was in a lot of hijinks when I was in the military, but that maybe the things that I would think are funny might be a little bit too dark for me to say on YouTube. So I'll leave the military ones out. But there was a little hijinks that happened in Nepal when I lived in Nepal. I lived in like the jungle part of Nepal for about 3 months. I was working out there. Well, I wasn't really working. I was doing aid work, so it was free. I was working for free in a clinic out there, doing like wound care and stuff. And while I was living out there for 3 months, I befriended a dude who owned a little restaurant, the Namaste restaurant. He made some delicious lo mein, buffalo lo mein. I love it. And his name was Booty. And Booty was like, listen, we're going to go out into the jungle and we're going to go find some wild rhinos to take some pictures of for you. And I was like, man, that sounds awesome. So me and Booty, we got on his moped, and I would like where I was in the jungle was already very rural, right? It was it was in the Chitwan National Park. It was during monsoon season, like no paved roads whatsoever. So like everything's dirt roads. And Booty decided to go on I don't know how he found it, but he found even more rural roads. I don't even think were roads. I think they were like foot trails. And because it was monsoon season, the roads were all jacked up. There was like holes and pits and everything all on these dirt roads. So it was a bumpy ride. And I have to tell you, an hour driving to the location and then an hour driving back, my ass was destroyed. That trip destroyed my ass. I think forever. I think to this day, I have injuries on my ass from that trip. But anyway, so we're driving there. I had to tell him because I'm hanging off the back, right? I'm not driving my own moped. I'm just letting him drive. So I'm hanging off the back of Booty, and I had to tell him like halfway through, like half an hour in, I'm like, you got to stop. I gotta like rub my ass. So I'm on the side of this like dirt trail in the jungle rubbing my ass, and Booty's just looking at me like I'm crazy, but I was like almost in tears. So anyway, we get to our location after about an hour driving on this moped on these dirt trails, And well, it's kind of our location. We still have a few like more 100 meters to walk, but the trail ends. So we have to go on foot, and we have to kind of bushwhack through the jungle. And Booty's in front, and we get to this location that is kind of a river, but it's not really a river. It's only like 30 feet across, like, I don't know what in meters, maybe like 10 meters. 10 meters across, so it's not that far across. But there are technically crocodiles in like the location that we were in Nepal. The crocodiles that there are, I don't know exactly what type they're called, but they have very narrow snouts. They basically just eat like little fish. They're not like regular crocodiles that could eat humans. I mean, I think they could technically eat a human, but they're not really going to try to attack. Well, they would attack a human, but they're not going to try to eat you. But you still don't want to get bit by the freaking crocodile. So Booty's in front. He's going like through this water, like small river area with like a big pole and a stick, and he's like sticking it in front of him to try to like scare away any crocodiles that might be like nesting on the bottom. And I'm behind him, and all of a sudden I look, and on Booty's back there is a gigantic tarantula, like the size of a friggin' dinner plate. It was disgusting, and I have arachnophobia. I hate spiders. So I yell, I'm like, Booty Makura, which I think it means spider. I think it means spider or tarantula. My Nepalese is absolute garbage now, but I'm pretty sure that is Nepalese for spider or tarantula. I'm like, Booty Makura, and he looks back, he wipes it off his back, it lands on the water. This thing like splays its legs out and starts flopping and trying to like flop its way towards me because it's looking for like dry land or a dry person to walk on. And I'll tell you what, at that point in my life, I realized I was more afraid of spiders than I was crocodiles, because I ran past Booty. I didn't care about checking for crocodiles anymore, and I just ran past him to the other side of the river, away from that stupid ass tarantula that was trying to crawl on me. So anyway, me and Booty, we get to the other side of the river here. I take off my shirt. I start flopping it around because I'm thinking maybe I have spiders on me. I was damn near about to take my pants off to start flopping that around, probably be butt naked checking for spiders. But yeah, I was just took my shirt off. Anyway, me and Booty, we continue on this not the foot trail, because there's really no foot trail anymore, but we continue through the jungle. We get to the area that he wants to show me, which is a nice little overlooked area, and there's a big open like field of just, I don't know, grass, I guess, underneath. And, you know, there's some rhinos out there, and it's really nice, really beautiful area. And we were about 50-ish meters away from the rhinos, which is safer because rhinos are territorial and they're aggressive, so they will charge you. Even though they don't like want to eat you, they'll still charge you and attack you because they're territorial. So you don't want to get too close to them. But 50 meters is pretty safe. They have really crappy eyesight, so they can't even see you at 50 meters, to be honest. So yeah, we took some pictures. Really cool. Saw some rhinos, and then we headed back, and we had the hour trip on the back of the moped, destroying my ass again to get back to our little village that we were in. So that was the funny hijinks that we were in Nepal. The next question from Guess My Name is going to be, if you could make a wish, what would the wish be? This is going to be a pretty boring answer that probably most people would say. I'd wish for probably about like 1 or 2 mil. I'd wish for $1 or $2 million. I'd put it in the bank and I'd live off the interest. I'm not a very grandiose person. I'm not going to buy expensive things. I don't plan to buy a mansion ever. Even if I was to win the lottery and I got a lot of money, I wouldn't buy a mansion. I wouldn't buy an expensive car. I would just pay off what I have currently, and I would live off the interest, and I would be a nerd and just play video games. Yeah. So that would be my wish, would be like 1 or 2 mil, live off the interest, and that's about it. All right, we have the next question from Valraven48. Valraven48 asks, why Inaros? That's a good question. I do a lot of my weapon testing and videos for weapons and melee weapons and everything on Inaros. Well, it was because at the when I first started doing this, I needed a Warframe that was a blank slate, that didn't have anything on him that would affect weapons, like performance. And I also wanted a Warframe that I never had to worry about survivability, because I wanted to completely focus on the weapon. I didn't want to be like, oh, I have to roll for rolling guard to keep myself alive, or oh, I have to press this ability to give myself like extra shields or health or something like that. I just wanted a dude that would never die. And that's what Inaros is. Inaros is a dude that will never die. You can basically just leave your computer, go take a dump, take your time, like maybe read a book while you're on the toilet, go back to your computer 30 minutes later, and he'll still be alive. Like that's Inaros. A little bit less true nowadays with Jade Eximuses. Jade Eximuses can eventually like laser down Inaros if you don't move. But besides Jade Eximuses, he pretty much just will never die until you reach very, very high levels of Steel Path. So I think he makes a good weapon tester because I don't have to worry about anything except for the weapon I'm testing. All right. We have the next question that comes from Kishan20101. Now, I don't know if he actually meant this question for this video, but I'm gonna answer it here anyway. I think it's a good question that I can kind of just give some general information on. So he asked, can you make a video on the best progenitors? Sorry, my little kitten is going crazy here. She wants to be on my desk. Can you make a video on the best progenitors? And well, first I want to say I did make a video already on the best progenitors. However, it's not super old, but there's been a lot of significant patches recently that might make some of that information not super accurate. I would say probably like 90% of it is accurate, but there's probably about 10% of it that might change nowadays because of new mods that came out and new things. But I also just want to talk in generalities and just kind of maybe tell people like what in general you're looking at when it comes for a progenitor. So the kitten is deciding to press keys now. You can't play Warframe, Freya. You can't play Warframe. Not yet. You're too small. It's an M-rated game. And you're only a few months old. That's right. All right. So you need to identify whether the weapon is a low alpha damage weapon or a high alpha damage weapon. This is not a perfect science. There's not really a perfect science to this, but generally, if you build out a weapon and you look at its damage and it says the damage is a few hundred, it would be considered a low alpha damage weapon. And if you build out the weapon and you look at the damage and it says a few thousand, I would consider that a high alpha damage weapon. Again, I'm talking in big generalities here because, there's critical multipliers don't get factored into like the paper damage that you see on your weapon chart there. So speaking in big generalities, but in general, after you build out your weapon, if you see a few hundred, it's a low alpha. If you see a few thousand, it's a high alpha weapon. So generally, your assault rifles, your machine guns, your submachine guns, those are going to be low alpha, and high alpha weapons will be things like rocket launchers, sniper rifles, things like that. Low alpha weapons will typically do best as viral or corrosive. Usually, viral will be slightly better than corrosive. However, viral is a lot easier nowadays to get like your pet to prime with. Like there's a lot of good ways to externally get viral. And because of that, corrosive is a good option too. You could just go corrosive and just externally get viral. Or if you don't want to externally get viral, you can just go viral 2 on your weapon. That being said, corrosive and viral can both be made by just using the toxic element. And so a toxic progenitor on a low alpha weapon is usually the way to go. So speaking in large generalities, usually on a low alpha weapon, toxic is going to be the best progenitor. It's because you can make your viral, which will be the best. Or if you're using an external viral primer, you can go corrosive. And that'll also be the best if you're using a viral primer. Now, high alpha weapons, one second. My cat is now trying to shut my computer down. Okay, so high alpha weapons, they don't get as much value out of viral as low alpha weapons. And it's because viral needs to be applied, and then the second shot is usually the one that takes advantage of it. And so if your weapon kills in one shot, you're not going to get pretty much any value out of viral. And so And so you need to be going for an element that has an on death or after death effect. And that's going to be blast or gas. So for high alpha, you're looking for blast or gas. Now, blast and gas both also have a in common element, and that is heat. So for a high alpha weapon, your best general progenitor is going to be heat. For a low alpha weapon, your best general progenitor is going to be toxic. Again, this is speaking in big generalities because there are going to be some specific cases where maybe this is not true, right? Maybe the weapon comes with an innate element that might make for a better combo. So I think I'll eventually update that like best progenitors list. That way I'll go through each one specifically. But I just thought like maybe just speaking in generalities might also help for some of like the easier weapons, right? There are some basic Kuva weapons out there, like the Kuva Carrick, for instance, right? It doesn't have an innate element that it comes with. It doesn't have anything weird about it. It's just an assault rifle that is low alpha damage, which makes it very easy to say toxic is the best progenitor. So for those type of weapons, you can kind of use those general tips that I said there. So yeah, that's all the questions that we went through there. We hit all of them. So again, thank you so much, guys, for your continued support. We got to 4,000 next year. Who knows? Maybe we'll get to 10. Maybe we'll get to 100. Maybe we'll go viral and we'll get to 1 million subscribers, right? Maybe if I do something crazy, I got to involve myself in some kind of controversy, and then maybe we can get to 1 million subscribers there. So, so thank you so much, guys. If you like the video, consider giving.